and everything was planned and running smoothly on the back end. So thank you very much, Sarah, for helping us out. All right, what is Women in Climate? Women in Climate, as probably most of you already know, is a nonprofit that aims to create a joyful and safe space for you all to learn and talk about climate. It's an inclusive, welcoming space, so you don't have to be in climate to be a member. We actually have many members who are not working in climate, but are interested in learning more, maybe look into transitioning into climate at some point one day, or interested in volunteering or starting a side project in climate. And that's pretty much my story, actually. So I met Michelle through my former job at WeWork, where I was in charge of building community for founders. And once I met Michelle, I decided I wanted to help her build and grow the Women in Climate community as a volunteer. And now over to Michelle. Please share a little bit about your background and about the beginnings of Women in Climate and everything that has happened since you hosted our very first dinner in New York back in February of this year. I can't believe it's been that long.
Yeah,
feels way shorter.
It's crazy. And it's just so wonderful to see all these familiar faces, our friends in Boston and Toronto, and even folks in Memphis. So everyone, I'm so happy that you're here. My name is Michelle. I like to call myself the chief organizer of Women in Climate. I guess I kind of founded it. And back in February, we had our first dinner where I essentially just, put an event on Eventbrite. Some people showed up. And then ever since then, we've had many different events, dinners in different cities from Boston to Toronto, New York, etc. I'm trying to control Stephanie's screen, but it's proving a little bit. Is it going forward? There we go. We have had networking events, we've had picnics, volunteer events, events with friends, events with other organizations, and you can bet you that there will be more events to come as well. During New York Climate Week, we had our very own event as well. Stephanie, can you go to the next slide? We had a celebration where we had an happy hour to celebrate all the women that are taking part in climate action today. We featured women-only speakers with speakers from the UN, We Don't Have Time, different entrepreneurs in the climate space, all from our New York community as well. And next slide, Stephanie. We at Women in Climate, I wanted to just make a little plug that we support the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm curious, who here has heard about the UN SDGs before? You can use a reaction and raise your hand if you've seen them before, used them. Okay, I'm seeing some people here. Okay, great. Lots of people have seen them before. So, for Women in Climate, we really focus on climate action, obviously, and gender equality, but there's also other SDGs that are important to us as well. And if you have a moment to kind of take a look at some of those, it's on our website, so you can see the different SDGs that we support. Next slide, Stephanie. So I will be attending COP27 in Egypt on behalf of Women in Climate, and I want to bring all of you with me through our Wall of Hope. And this is an initiative where I want to make sure people have a voice and they can be heard by the leaders that are attending. And so far we've had already around maybe 30 people submit their hopes. So you can head over to our wall, see all the different hopes that are there. And if you'd like to submit one, there's a form at the bottom. I'll make you an asset. You can share it on social media as well. And the idea is to really build some momentum and use our collective voice to make sure, what is important to us is being heard by leaders globally. One slide. If you are in a position to support us, buy us a coffee or support us on a monthly basis, we are a 501c3 charity in New York, so you can send us a donation that is tax-free. For those that send a donation over $30, we are gifting our pins while they supplies last. If you don't live in New York, we still have a way for you to have a friend or someone pick it up at one of our partners who have storefronts in New York, and they can go, a friend or family member can go in and grab them for you. So that's it from me. Thank you so much for being here. And Stephanie, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Cool. Let's walk through today's agenda. What are we gonna do within the next 50 minutes? So first, we are already done with our first agenda point, which is our welcome. Next, we will hear from our sponsor. And after that, we have two awesome speakers lined up. Ooh, I think Michelle's still remote controlling my slides here. I'm gonna stop you from doing that, Michelle. All right, back to the agenda. We'll hear from two amazing speakers from our community, Katharine and Valentina, and we will also have some time for networking. So be ready for breakout room action. I'll do another heads up right before we go into the breakout room, so you're ready for that part. And then we'll be doing a quick wrap up and closing. All right. Next, let's hear from our sponsor, Impact Hub New York. Thank you so much for supporting the very first edition of Catalyze and for making this event possible today. A very warm welcome to Lindsay, Climate Innovator in Residence at Impact Hub New York. Thank you so much for being here, Lindsay.
Hi, yeah. So I work with Impact Hub New York Metropolitan area as the climate entrepreneur in residence, focused on creating the Morristown climate study to serve as a blueprint for suburban climate action and support the Climate Action Center that we've created. My background, I have about a dozen years of working in various elements in the sustainability space, the built environment and urban design think tanks like RMI and Clinton Climate Initiative to urban sustainability education in Los Angeles. But we're so excited to be sponsoring this event and fully behind the work Women in Climate does, and Michelle and Stephanie. And it's also been great working with you over the past few initiatives, including our Impact State of Mind 3-day conference last month, and then the Sustainable Cities Lab all last week, which supported climate tech startups from Switzerland and the US. But a little bit about
Angel has been here sending you lots of light and love.
All right, Lindsay, you should be back on.
Oh, okay. I don't know what happened there.
Sorry, I think we had a few people that were not on mute, and now I think we're good to go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
So Impact Hub is the world's largest social innovation network aligned with the 2030 sustainability or sustainable development goals. There's over 107 Impact Hubs in 64 countries, supporting 24,000 entrepreneurs with a total net reach and impact of about 100 million. So we help impactful initiatives take off and scale. Okay, let me change. Okay. Oh, wait. Okay. So each Impact Hub is independently owned and operated. Our mandate is for New York metropolitan area, which includes New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. We work to advance the SDGs broadly and take a front seat on combating climate change through innovation and social challenges in an interconnected approach. We support our entrepreneurs through events, conferences, incubators, accelerators, experiences, networking opportunities, and collaborative spaces. And exciting, we recently launched America's first Center for Suburban Climate Action in Morristown, less than an hour outside of Manhattan. But because 52% of Americans live in suburbs, and the carbon footprint per capita is 4 times higher in suburbs than cities, There's no tackling climate change without addressing suburbs. Oh, sorry. That's our space in Morristown. It's really fun, and you should come by and visit. And then here's some photos of recent events in the past few years, including Michelle in the top right there at our Impact State of Mind conference. And let me just get some links here. But the best way to follow our work is to sign up for our newsletter. And I'm going to put that in eventually. So you can take it over, Michelle and Stephanie.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. We'll definitely make sure to share the links. We'll also be putting all the important links that were shared in the session today in our contact information sheet, the networking sheet that Michelle just shared earlier. So we'll be adding the links in there for easy access, so you don't have to copy them from the chat if you don't want to. They'll all be in the sheet. Awesome. Now I'm very excited to hand over to our very first speaker, Katharine, who's a policy specialist at the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance, one of our amazing Boston members. So Katharine, the stage is yours.
Hello, thank you. I just got the unmute. Hey y'all, I'm Katharine. Thanks for that introduction. I live in Cambridge, Mass right now, but I am from the eastern woody part of Connecticut. And right now, as was mentioned, I work as a policy specialist for a statewide nonprofit called the Massachusetts Rivers Alliance. Stephanie, you had mentioned me clicking through my slides. Do I need a special permission to do that? I don't think I have it right now. Ho, you just gave it to me. Amazing. This is my first time remote controlling. What thrills. I'm still not sure that I can click, but you did it. Okay. So I'm Katharine. I work in policy, but in my free time, I really like being outside. On the far left is a picture from a climate rally I went to in 2019 in Hartford. I haven't been to one since COVID happened, but I'm itching to go again. I feel a real high from doing direct activism and being in loud community with people that share those same values. Other pics are from some different outdoor pursuits I did this summer. I like to spend a lot of time camping, biking, hiking, doing anything I can. That's what recharges me. My goal this year was to try bike packing, which is like backpacking, but you're on a bike, so you can go farther and it's better for your back. I successfully did that a couple of times this summer. It's a total blast. If you are interested in doing the same thing, you can give me a call. Also, it's my new favorite hobby. All right. Hey, Chris, I see you. I'm trying to go to the next slide and I still don't know that I have that control. Maybe I do and I just don't know how to use it.
You do have it, Katharine. I think there's a little bit of a lag. So if you prefer, you can just tell me to go to the next slide and I'll do it for you.
We'll do that. Nice. So my climate work involves mainly policy and communications. I'm going to talk about the function of the work more so than the content of water that I work on, but happy to talk about that separately if you're interested in what's happening with water, what our challenges and solutions are. Most of my work, like I said, is policy and communication. So I help to write legislation that will be proposed at our state house. I help to edit legislation that other people have written if they want the water perspective to make sure that rivers are incorporated and protected in different legislation that people are trying to pursue. And then I advocate for those different policies. So that means talking directly with legislators, their staff, maintaining those relationships, testifying at public hearings. That's what the pictures are on the right. and really driving the message home to legislators on why they need to protect our waterways and our environment for people and for climate. So all of that work really is education. Legislators are generalists. They are working on so many subjects, education, transportation, healthcare, that most of them don't come into this work having a water background and are working on so many things that they constantly have to be educated on the kind of niche that we work on, and to learn from our expertise. Even those who mean well, who want to work on this stuff, just sometimes don't have the background, don't have the understanding of what the main challenges are on the ground, what those solutions might be. For example, this summer, a huge part of my work was on drought. You might not think of New England as a drought-prone part of the country, and certainly we don't experience it in the way that California or New Mexico would, but we certainly do experience drought. It's increasing with climate change, and our drought management is not reflective of our new climate normals. It's reflective of kind of the old weather patterns. We're experiencing the same thing with flooding on the other extreme. So part of the advocate role is to, again, educate legislators on what's happening, what we can expect going forward with climate change, how that impacts our waterways, our drinking water, our wastewater systems, and what they can do to be part of the solution. Mass Rivers is a statewide nonprofit organization. We have 85 member groups. Some of those groups are also statewide, like the Nature Conservancy or Mass Audubon, but many of them are place-based. Many of them work locally on a particular river to make sure it stays clean, to provide awesome recreational opportunities, to drive volunteer groups. So they are working really hard locally with their municipalities, with their neighborhoods to protect their local ecosystem. And so a lot of those groups don't have the time or the capacity, since a lot of them are all volunteer, to monitor what's happening at the state level. There are a lot of nitty-gritty details that can happen with state policy. Sometimes legislative process can be intimidating or overwhelming for people. So part of my role is to track that stuff and let our members know, the people who are actually doing this work on the ground, when there's a bill or a budget provision that will affect their watershed, affect their work. And then I will kind of rally the troops to say, hey, there's this bill happening. We really need you to come and testify or submit comment or call your senator and let them know that you really support this bill or really oppose this bill. And the same goes for budget measures too. A big part of my work is working on the state budget every year to make sure that our environmental state agencies get funded at the levels that they need to keep doing this work successfully. Many of you have probably experienced that environmental agencies historically get super underfunded compared to what they need to actually do the work that's necessary to, hold our society at a level that's livable and sustainable for the future. I can report back that this past year, the coalition I work with had 5 budget requests for our state budget, and we got all 5. So that was a pretty cool win in Massachusetts, that our environmental agency has got a pretty solid bump in their funding. I also convene these place-based groups. We have a monthly water policy call. That's just share intel and to strategize about what our collective strategy will be on these policies going forward. So we have an aligned policy platform. And like I said, I do a lot of communications work. So everything I said involves communications, mostly talking to people one-on-one in small groups, doing public speaking, both in legislative forums, at state agency hearings, and also to the media. But I do kind of the classic comms work. I do our biweekly e-newsletter. I do all of our social media. I make fact sheets to explain all of this stuff on paper so people have a quick understanding of what we're talking about. All of that requires me to boil down these sometimes technical topics into messaging that the public can understand. My organization is also a small nonprofit. We have a staff of 5 people, small but mighty. So we all do a little bit of everything to make our operations run smoothly. So when we have events, that's just us all contributing to put on events and other functions of a small nonprofit. We can go to the next slide. Thanks. So I've learned in this role, and I'll note that before I did this work for Mass Rivers. I did similar work in Connecticut for land conservation, working at the state level there. I learned through those two different jobs that advocates are incredibly important, because even if someone is an elected official or a state agency person who holds some power over our natural resources, you really can't assume that they are entering that position with the background knowledge and expertise that those in the field have. And you can't assume that they fully understand the challenges and solutions we have in my case, the water space. So when I explain my job to friends or people, sometimes they equate my job to being like the Lorax, because I speak up for the trees and I speak up for rivers. And that's frankly not far off from what it's like. But it's incredibly important, like I said, because so many legislators are generalists, to educate them on exactly what's happening in their districts and statewide, and to be extraordinarily clear on what those solutions are and what we want them to do. Again, you might assume that if you say, we want to have clean water, we want to have recreational opportunities on our waterways, we want to have public access to waterways, people don't know how to necessarily implement that. So the advocate's role is also to give them very clear, very obvious instructions on what we want to achieve those goals. With water in particular, you might think that everyone knows how important water is, how crucial it is to your body, your community, your future. I hope you all were drinking water today. If not, this is your reminder, hydrate. But even though we all know that experientially, so many people, especially in positions of power, don't prioritize working on those things compared to everything else that's on their plate. So again, the advocate's role is to highlight why this is so important and elevate that subject so that they actually spend time and energy to advance these priorities. Next slide. This question, oh man, I had so many bullets typed out. I could have a 20-pound magic wand. I got so many requests, but thank you. The top request is, like I was saying, for people, especially legislators and people in state agencies, to prioritize taking care of water, land, and our environment as a top priority. We all in this room know that having those natural resources protected is absolutely key in order for a sustainable future, for our livelihoods, for our communities. And there's plenty of people who are elected who are environmentalists, as they describe themselves, who want to do good on this stuff. But when push comes to shove and they have a zillion things to work on, so often environmental policies get put on the bottom of their priority list. So my magic wand would be for everyone to really understand the gravity of having clean rivers, having water, having healthy ecosystems, and understanding that that work does impact positively education, healthcare, community development, economic development. I think there's been a real perception shift amongst that crew, where in the 1970s, I think the environmental movement was viewed as like, oh, save the bees, save the whales. And, of course, with love to the bees and the whales, it is so much more serious than kind of the cute PR that was happening. And I credit a lot of that to the youth climate movements like Sunrise, who have made the case so clear that, again, working on environment, climate is public health policy, is community development. So that's a magic wand ask, is for everyone, including residents, to understand that gravity and be motivated to be part of the solution. The third bullet is a little fun fact that in Mass, a lot of our summer water use goes to watering lawns. That's non-essential outdoor water use. It's considered non-essential. It's pretty wasteful. I'll say it. I'm over lawns and how much water they waste when it's kind of a scarce resource. Next slide. It is my last slide. If you learned anything from my chat today, it's that advocacy is for everybody. You absolutely do not need any kind of special background, education, or expertise to call your senator, send them the email, get involved. Your lived experience, your interest, and your passion for these topics is absolutely enough and qualifies you to call your state rep, tell your city councilor what you want them to do. If you voted, you have quite literally hired those people at your city, state, and national levels to represent you in these bodies. So it is their job to take your input and act on it. I also want to plug that I know Congress and what's happening with the president and in the federal House and Senate gets a lot of airtime, is exciting, and that's true. But I do want to plug, it is way easier to follow and get involved with state and local policy. Getting to call your congressional representative is kind of hard, but you can just call your city councilor and you can get to know them in a meaningful way. State and local policy also impacts your daily life in a much more tangible way than the stuff at the federal level does. So I really encourage you, if you don't already, to look up who represents you at your town or city level, who represents you in your state house. If you need help doing that, I can help you. Send them an email, say, hey, this is me, and I really care about X, Y, and Z. You can leave it there, or if you have the next part, you can ask them for what you want them to do. And again, you do not have to be shy or be afraid to make it super obvious and super clear what you're asking them to do. Everyone's an advocate. If you're in this community, if you already work in climate, you are especially, you have superpower. You have expertise and motivation to let them know what you're seeing and what you want them to do. That's what I got. And there's a million ways to contact me through the internet or on my phone. And I encourage you to do so if you want to learn more, or if you need like a little pep talk, if you're like, you know what, I am going to email my senator and tell them that I want them to pass XYZ. Email me, text me, and I will hype you up to do that, because it is so exciting and so cool that people like you care about this and will take 5 minutes out of their day to let people know what they want them to do. That's what I got.
Thank you so much, Katarina. I love that call to action, because it really shows that there's something everyone can do at any level, right? It's not always like so easy to think it's all at the top level, but it really starts in our communities, in front of our own backyard. So thank you for that reminder. All right. Bear with me 1 second while I'm bringing our next speaker up on stage.
Here I am.
Woo, here you are. Welcome, Valentina, Senior Associate with the Climate Intelligence Program from New York. The stage is yours, and I'll let you remote control your slides.
Yes, thank you. Hopefully that works. Thank you, Katharine, for the very exciting presentation, +1 on the importance of advocacy in climate and beyond. I first wanted to thank Women in Climate, especially Stephanie and Michelle, to invite me here today. It's exciting to be part of the first event of the Catalyze series. And thanks again to the sponsor Impact Hub for hosting us and for having us today. So yes, let's see if this works. I just clicked. While we get to the next slide, hopefully, I am Valentina Guido, a Senior Associate in the Climate Intelligence Program at RMI. RMI is a global nonprofit that works to decarbonize the energy sector from so many different angles. We have 9 global programs. We work across geographies worldwide, and RMI grew a lot in the past year. When I joined around 2 years ago, it used to be a tiny nonprofit. Well, not tiny, but I think we had around 100, 200 maybe people worldwide. And right now we have 600. So in just 1 year, we experienced this incredible growth across so many countries. We have people working for RMI in, I think, most countries worldwide. So it's very exciting. It's a very nice and exciting place to be. So a bit about myself. I moved to New York in February this year. I started working for RMI around 2 years ago, as I said, but COVID and travel ban complications, it took me a while to get to New York, but I'm glad to finally be here and get to be part of the Women in Climate community. So there's a picture of me having a walk in Central Park just a few days ago. And on the right here, I have a picture of my team, the Climate Intelligence Program, which also grew a lot in the past year. It used to be around 10 people when I joined, and now look at us, we're around 40 people. And we have at least once a year very exciting retreats in Colorado, because that's where RMI is headquartered. And this is a picture of us in June at the retreat we just gathered for. So very exciting teamwork and very exciting bunch of people to work with. Let's see, I clicked to the next slide. The lag is very long. Great, here we are. So my climate work involves two topics. So I actually work on two initiatives inside the Climate Intelligence Program. The one is on one side, one is the Supply Chain Emissions Initiative, where I focus on mineral supply chain traceability and the broad ESG space, meaning accounting of environmental, social, and governance attributes, characteristics along mineral supply chains. So there's a lot of work there around how do we trace impacts along supply chains while minerals travel from the mine site to the market gate, and how do we account for not only GHG emissions as we strive to decarbonize the world economy, but we also account for social impacts, human rights violations, or child labor along supply chains, especially mineral supply chains. As we know, they're very negatively affected and involved in all sorts of human rights violations and very weak labor standards, unfortunately. On the other side, I work on carbon markets, especially voluntary carbon markets. So we just set up an initiative in January this year. Inside the Climate Intelligence Program, we focus on improving trust and transparency in the voluntary carbon market. These markets, for those of you who might not know, are those in which companies can buy offsets. We call them carbon credits to use a less negative term, but we broadly are talking about offsets here that companies buy to compensate their emissions. And so, as you might know, there's a lot of controversy in the quality of these offsets, right? And their additionality and their effectiveness to remove and avoid emissions. So we have done a lot of research on that front, and we plan to work to bring more transparency and trust in the market infrastructure that is currently broken. So here's a picture of the theory of change of the Climate Intelligence Program. We work across different initiatives as the two I just mentioned, to deliver climate differentiated products and markets, meaning markets where commodities and products can be differentiated and distinguished based on their climate, so GHG attributes, emissions, and broadly ESG impacts along supply chains. So our vision is for a market where commodities and products can be really differentiated based on the negative externalities that they produce along their supply chains. That can be achieved through these four pillars. Of course, it's a work that will require a lot of time. We first focus on emissions visibility, then we work to better account and attribute those emissions and other ESG impacts. And we also plan to work on providing the digital systems that will enable the transition to differentiated commodities. And lastly, we also work to improve related standards and governance of markets where we can really tell commodities apart based on the impacts they have on climate and beyond. How do we do that? What do I do in my daily work life? We do a lot of research, a lot of writing that we hope will influence, and it certainly does, companies and decision makers. So we also submit to requests for information of various government agencies. We consult with stakeholders, for example, other standard setters in the mineral and metals industry, and companies that strive to improve their supply chain practices and their traceability operations. We also will work with these stakeholders, these market players, to build the platforms that are needed to bring transparency and trust in markets. On one side, the voluntary carbon markets, but more broadly, markets where, once again, we can differentiate commodities based on their attributes of production. Let's see if I can jump to the next slide. Great. So why does this matter? This matters, and I'll separate these two for the work on traceability and the work on voluntary carbon markets. This matters on one side because the energy transition is metal intensive and will be for a long time to come metal intensive. The IRENA, the international, no, I won't go into spelling the acronym because I forgot it, but the IRENA estimates that demand for minerals will increase 7-fold by 2030 compared to the current levels of demand for battery minerals, included in the broadly speaking minerals demand that will increase. So decarbonization of mineral supply chains, which many organizations are working to deliver, not only need to look at GHG emissions, but it needs to be just and fair. So as demand increase and we increase supply and we strive to decarbonize supply chains, let's also make sure that this decarbonization is equitable and fair for all the people involved. And as of right now, 80% of US companies don't know if their products contain conflict minerals, which is unacceptable, and we are working to change that. We think that technology can help to promote transparency, but we need to reach scale because at the moment we have B2B, business to business agreements between, for example, Tesla and BHP, the big famous mining company, but those agreements will not, have broader impacts in the whole industry. So we need to reach scale to make sure that these practices for responsible sourcing become the norm in the industry. And regulation is catching up. So look, for example, at the IRA, the recent EV tax credit that concerns battery minerals and traceability of those battery minerals, starting from 2024, reaching 70% of traceability requirements by 2028, and the battery passport in the EU that will require some sort of digital traceability for battery minerals starting 2026. So these changes are happening quite soon, and companies need to level up and to really adjust to this transition. So RMI is here to help. We talk to these companies. We also have been involved. The US policy program has been involved partially in delivering the IRA. On the carbon market side, we do believe that carbon markets can help us achieve net zero by 2050, but only if we overcome the challenges that they are currently facing in terms of scarcity of supply, quality, trust, and transparency. And here again, technology can support, but we need nonprofits in the space to really make sure that we approach things and transformation from a trust and transparency angle rather than from a profit angle. So once we fix these markets, carbon credits will hopefully effectively sustain livelihoods in the global south, which they were poised to do, but didn't really deliver on until now. I clicked on my next slide. Maybe Stephanie, you could click. Thank you. Great. I'll try to go quickly through these. I got the 10-minute mark. So if I could have a magic wand, I would really like to see integrated, robust systems at scale to trace commodities along mineral supply chains. Ideally, companies would be required by law to source 100% of their aluminum responsibly by 2025. So batches of aluminum could get to manufacturers with a QR code or some sort of digital passport like the one they're proposing in the EU, showing their path from mine site to market gate, tracking all sorts of ESG impacts. Excuse me. And consumers would have access to the information as well, similarly to what we currently see for fair trade bananas. And on the carbon market side, I wish they would never be a greenwashing tool. So they, in an ideal world, they would be verified and traceable, disclosed with details by companies that purchase them, and they would generate revenues for indigenous people and local communities worldwide, and especially in the global south, where they can support land rights recognition. Again, here technology can play a big role, especially for carbon removal. I wish that carbon credits could provide finance to development of carbon removal technologies to reach the CDR targets that have been established by the IPCC and the ETC most recently. Great, if we could go to the next slide, please. I just want to wrap up to say that you can follow the Climate Intelligence Program on Twitter. We publish a lot of interesting content. You can get in touch with me on LinkedIn. I'd be happy to continue this conversation, to exchange ideas on these two broad areas, and also identify collaboration opportunities down the line. You can read more from me and the team. We recently published a blog on the Inflation Reduction Act and the EV battery supply chains implications. We recently published a blog on how to build trusted voluntary carbon markets, and also more broadly around ESG and tracing ESG characteristics along supply chains. So stay tuned for more. We have another report coming out on mirror supply chain traceability, and I am currently writing an article on equity and environmental justice in the voluntary carbon market that I would love you all to read. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentina. I love hearing about other people's climate jobs because I don't have a climate background. So it's just so cool to learn all the forms and shapes a climate job can take in so many areas. So thank you so much for sharing your personal journey and what you're working on. I think we are now ready to go into breakout rooms. Hope you all saw my heads up in the chat and are ready to mix and mingle with some new faces from our community. I will be setting up the breakout rooms now. And I think, Michelle, how much time do we have left for breakout rooms?
I think, yeah, 5-6 minutes. I think that'd be great.
All right, we'll have 3 to 4 people per room. And there's an icebreaker on the slide. So for you as a conversation starter, of course, you can talk about where you're joining from today and what you're most interested in learning about when it comes to climate. And of course, also feel free to chat about how you like the presentations from our speakers today and what you got to take away from those. Okay, I think we'll have 9 rooms and I'll open them now. We'll send you a quick heads up. You should see a notification at the top of your Zoom screen when we have 1 minute left. So you'll get a chance to wrap up. Have fun.